Welcome to the Partnership for National Unity press conference for February 27th, 2026. I am your moderator, Shanika Heath. Joining today's press conference is Mr. Sherrod Duncan, Member of Parliament, and Mr. Saito Andrews, Member of Parliament for the Partnership for National Unity. Today's press statement will be read in two parts, and we will begin with that reading from Member of Parliament Sherrod Duncan.
Thank you very much, Shanika. Fellow Guyanese, across our 10 administrative regions, during the budget debate and the examination of the 2026 national estimates, the Partnership for National Unity members of Parliament effectively dissected the budget and in the process revealed several glaring limitations. It has become unmistakably clear during the 2026 budget estimates review in the National Assembly that corruption under the People's Progressive Party Civic is not episodic, it is systematic, it is historic, it is present. If left unchecked, it will define future governance in our republic. The parliamentary review process has continued exposures of a troubling pattern of financial irregularities, missing reports, unexplained allocations, and deliberate opacity in the management of billions of dollars of public funds. This is not an administrative oversight. This is government by concealment. Let us begin with the Men on a Mission program, which is budgeted at $900 million in the current fiscal year. There are no reliable reports laid in Parliament for 2023, 2024, or 2025 outlining measurable outcomes or expenditure breakdowns. The explanation offered was that the absence of reports was an unfortunate error, quote unquote. In any accountable system of public financial management, 3 consecutive years of missing report would constitute a governance crisis. Under this administration, it is dismissed as routine. Transparency and performance monitoring are not optional in a $900 million program. The absence of documentation in the face of persistent allegation of corruption only heightens suspicion. And equally troubling is the Office of the Commissioner of Information. The Commissioner receives a $35 million compensation package annually, and yet for over a decade, no required reports have been laid in the National Assembly as well. 10 years of non-compliance is untenable. This is not a clerical lapse. It is a structural breakdown in statutory accountability. The very office that is tasked with facilitating access to information, they operate without transparency. And at the same time, members of the public, the government owes approximately $100 million to Saarbrück News. The Prime Minister could not identify a specific budget line item to settle this debt and merely indicated that it would be paid within the fiscal year without a specific timeline. The state pays $35 million annually for a commissioner of information who does not report, yet fails to promptly settle its legitimate obligations to independent media. This is not merely financial mismanagement, members of the public. It is information control. This is not merely financial mismanagement, I repeat. It is information control. It weakens the media's independence and undermines democratic oversight. Additionally, the state-owned media entities, including the National Communications Network, NCN, which are funded by taxpayers, provide extensive coverage to the government while denying equitable access to the parliamentary opposition. Corruption is not confined to financial theft alone. It extends to the manipulation and monopolization of information, as we've seen repeatedly in our country. A democracy cannot function where government controls both the purse and the narrative. We wish to draw your attention as well to the glaring duplication at Maikoni, where a guard hut already completed has reappeared in the 2026 budget as a fresh allocation request. This is either gross incompetence or deliberate padding of the estimates. When completed infrastructure surfaces as a new budget item, it speaks to systematic breakdown in the project tracking and expenditure verification. Further, the Ministry of Agriculture has admitted that although $650 million has been allocated to the Mahika Maikoni Abari Agricultural Development Authority, only $1.7 million is earmarked to service a $7.9 million debt owed in rates and taxes to the Union Narstegai NDC. This represents fiscal strangulation. We see the same thing in Georgetown, for instance. Fiscal strangulation of the local government organs by central authority. When the central government underfunds its statutory obligations to local democratic bodies, it undermines decentralized governance. Also, the situation at the Guyana Sugar Corporation, GAISUCO, remains emblematic of subsidized inefficiency. GAISUCO owes $2 billion to the National Insurance Scheme, and yet receives $8.4 billion in subsidy just this year. The Minister of Agriculture has conceded that the corporation continues to depend on state transfer and offers hope, he said, and optimism within a 5-year plan for justification. Corruption, as we have said, is not only theft, it is the repeated funding of failure without structural reform. Again, without structural reform, leaving workers long-term benefits like the NIS exposed. Likewise, the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs has allocated $500 million to commence construction on a 2-story hostel without detailed drawings and finalized plans, relying instead on preliminary sketches. This approach risks cost overruns, of which we have seen too much of over the last 5 years. It also risks stall execution and future supplemental requests. Infrastructure without finalized technical documentation reflects a disregard for procurement discipline. And finally, for my part, in the Gas to Shore project, the Prime Minister has admitted that initial soil testing for phase 1 was inconclusive and that additional testing will be required. Due diligence on this project is not secondary. It is not a secondary step in such a mega super infrastructure project. It is foundational. And with a national budget now approximately 5 times that of 2019, Guyanese expect rigorous execution, not patchwork connections after billions have been committed. I thank you.
Thank you. MP Psycho Andrews.
Good morning. The Public Works Ministry allocated $0 to subsidize the Berbice River Bridge, despite the bridge being made toll-free in 2025 of August. Simultaneously, the government announced its intention to purchase the bridge from private operators, even though ownership is scheduled to transfer to the state at $0 in 2027. The rationale for accelerating purchase by 1 year remains unconvincing. The optics of directing public funds to private stakeholders ahead of an already agreed transfer raises legitimate concerns about beneficiaries and fiscal prudence. The same ministry allocated $1.5 billion to subsidize the Transport and Harbor Department, yet no specific allocation was identified for fuel and lubricants, despite the MV Hercules consuming over $73 million in fuel during the 2025 fiscal year. When pressed on operational contract costs for the vessel, the minister avoided direct answers, citing only an early operational estimate of approximately $400,000 per day, which annualizes to roughly $146 million. He simultaneously confirmed that a separate contract exists. The absence of clear contractual disclosure in the context of substantial public expenditure is unacceptable. In another major project, 19.6 billion Guyana dollars is stated as a project cost. 15.8 billion is awarded as a contract sum to Caribbean Green Builders. Yet 16.6 billion has already been dispersed. The ministry failed to clearly distinguish between the overall project cost and the contract value. When billions are allocated, contracted, and disbursed without clarity, the public is entitled to suspect fiscal indiscipline or worse. Regarding the proposed Corentyne River Bridge linking Guyana to Suriname, the Minister of Public Works failed to articulate Guyana's stake or outline dispute resolution mechanisms, stating only that no issues has arisen during discussions. Bilateral infrastructure of this magnitude requires defined legal frameworks and risk-sharing arrangements. Absence of clarity today may translate into asymmetric obligations tomorrow. Finally, the APNU notes the serious public allegations raised by contractor Jackson Nevins concerning the Osororo Secondary School project, including claims of improper financial demands, non-payment for variation, and intimidation. These allegations reportedly include supporting messages and photographic evidence. Given the gravity of these claims, the APNU expects a formal and transparent investigation. Pending such investigation, the minister implicated should be relieved of duties to preserve institutional integrity. What emerges from the 2026 budget estimates is a consistent pattern: missing reports, duplicated allocations, unexplained disbursements, underfunded statutory obligations, subsidies without reform, incomplete due diligence, and opaque contracting. This is not an isolated flaw in one ministry. This is a governance architecture designed without robust accountability safeguards. The PPP's record demonstrates that corruption is not a relic of the past. It persists in the present through budgetary manipulation and informal control. If allowed to continue unchecked, it will shape the future of public finance in Guyana. Oil revenues have expanded our fiscal capacity dramatically. With expansion must come strengthened systems of oversight. Instead, we see weakened transparency and normalized irregularities. APNU remains committed to defending parliamentary oversight, demanding full disclosure of public expenditure, protecting independent media, ensuring that every dollar of the Guyanese people money is subjected to rigorous scrutiny. We therefore reiterate our call for full and timely statutory reporting across all agencies, clear linkage between allocations, contracts, and disbursements, strengthened procurement discipline and project verification systems, alignment of budget size with demonstrated absorptive capacity, equitable access to state resources and information platforms, transparent investigation of all credible allegations of misconduct, institutional reforms to ensure accountability keeps pace with national revenue growth. Guyanese deserve a system where public funds are managed with discipline, where transparency is the norm and not the exception, and where development is grounded in integrity. The 2026 budget has already been passed. What remains is whether its execution will continue along the same path or whether accountability will finally assert itself. Guyanese deserve development built on integrity, not expediency, on due diligence, not only optimism, on accountability, not concealment. Thank you.
Thank you, MP. At this time, the floor is open for questions on the first statement. So you can do so, of course, by the raise of hand and stating your media house. I see the hand of Mr. Adam Harris. You are still muted, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, sorry about that. Good morning, all. We aren't many, only me and Anasa Williams. A couple of quick questions. One for Cheryl. Now, we talked about the sugar estates and the allocations and what have you. In 2020, the government said it was coming to reopen those sugar estates that were closed. Is there any word on how many sugar estates have been successfully reopened over the past, 5 years, 5 and a piece years?
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. There is no official word, I think, save one sugar estate that was open. But whether it was one or three, I think our subject MP, the Shadows Sector of Vincent Jordan, outlined clearly during the budget debates and scrutiny that the production has been consistently low, even when the government has revised its production target down 2 or 3 times in any given year. The production fails to rise to the occasion, and Gaisuko continues to underperform based on the amount of financial injection that the government has been given Gaisuko over the years. And one understands why it is doing this, but I think hard choices will have to be made sooner or later. One has seen the government has come to where APNU was on this issue, saying that they have to diversify and go into planting soya and other different crops on what was traditionally sugarcane lands. And so without saying right-sizing the sugar issue, they're slowly coming to where we have always been on the reality of where sugar is. But I think it's because they have recognized too that sugar has consistently been underperforming. But I have no doubt that our colleague Vince Wright Jordan is going to, in the coming days and weeks, be speaking more on the subject matter.
So another question, please. I also noticed that prior to 2020, GPL, Guyana Power and Light, had actually been operating with a surplus. Now, this budget, I think GPL, if we how much $1 billion the government is putting into GPL. And while these things are being highlighted, my question is there nothing that the opposition can do to put the government's back against the wall to really justify this wanton expenditure that's going on?
Well, I think ultimately, the Guyanese people are going to be the judge of the performance of an entity like GPL. But what are the facts? The 2024 Public Utilities Commission report told us that when set against the benchmarks, 8 benchmarks, power, production, and a number of other things, we failed 9 benchmarks. We failed 8 of 9. We keep hearing about this excess capacity and all of that, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. It's in the number of blackouts we continue to have on a daily basis, even though they continue to say about all of this capacity they've had. Any Guyanese family encounters 2 or 3 episodes of blackout in any given day, and that is the fact of the matter. We quizzed the subject minister, Deodat Indar, for instance, on LETEM. They said when Como Falls came online on the grid, when Mokomoka came on the grid and the solar energy mix came on the grid, they would have had a reduction in the cost that the folks in Region 9 pay for electricity. And to date, with all 3 online, still the folks in LETEM are still paying the same cost. Now, the minister would only respond to say that whenever the head of state makes a decision about the reduction in cost, it will be communicated. The promise has not been fulfilled. And so it behoves any Guyanese to sit down and think and hope that when the Gas to Shore project comes online, we're going to have a 50% reduction. What we're seeing with our naked eyes, they've gone back on their word. And so we're not hopeful. They keep saying again quite recently that they have all this excess capacity, but we maintain the number of blackouts Guyanese face on a daily basis. This is households and businesses. It's very, very telling. And the fact when you look at some of what they have removed, even VAT from generators and so on, I mean, come on, the facts are staring us in our faces every single day.
Adam, I want to add to what MP Duncan is saying. GPL, at the end of the day, the Guyanese people definitely will have to hold GPL accountable. One of the first things we have to be able to bring to the fore is the fact that during the APNU time, Minister Patterson purchased brand new generators. GPL has been behind on anticipating the needs, the generation needs, and being proactive on expanding that capacity. And so rather than follow what Minister Patterson was doing at the time, GPL sat, the ministers, they sat on, and they did not do what they had to do. And it only resulted in us getting a whole lot of more blackouts. What they ended up doing too was instead of paying $1 million for brand new 1 megawatt of brand new generating capacity, we paid $1 million for used equipment to generate 1 megawatt of electricity. And this is where the money goes down the flow. It goes down the drain. The other issue we have with GPL is these projections as to where our peak demand is going to be. Recently, we heard that peak demand is going to go to 1650 megawatts. And if you think about it, at GPL's current capacity of 286 and the Gas to Shore project coming on at 300, even if you add a second Gas to Shore project in Berbice at another 300, and you add the Amelia Falls at 186, you're still looking at a shortfall from that 1650 finding itself in 2030. So these projections, you have to be able to question these projections. So GPL is in a bad place. The ministry that is handling this agency needs to be honest with the Guyanese people. Let us think about it. The magnitude of the explosion of from 300 megawatts in 2026 to 1650 by 2030, you're talking about almost 5.5 times the generating capacity. Trinidad and Tobago at its peak, its highest, was 2.4 between a 20-year period. So, and Trinidad is more highly industrialized than Guyana, heavily industrialized. Trinidad and Tobago has more people than Guyana. So if we're thinking about consumer demand, Trinidad is an example. So the question is, where are we getting these estimates from?
Yeah.
We have to question these estimates. Is it a case where we're throwing out these estimates to justify overpriced infrastructure projects when it comes to power generation?
Yeah. And I think that MP Andrews is totally accurate in terms of the projection. Lots of it might be grassmatics, and they might probably give grassmatics a bad name. But let's hazard that they're right. They got all of this excess demand. Then they got some other problems, which might be sequencing problems, because there are so many communities that are still without power. If we have all of this excess demand, then that demand has to get to homes. That is where it matters. And whether it is LP Enterprise on the East Coast that doesn't have power, you got any given housing scheme that is new.
Yeah.
You have housing schemes that is new, might have power, and you have old ones on the books that are still languishing without power, whether it's here in Region 4 or it's in the hinterland. Too many housing projects operate without power. And while we're talking about power, the things that go with servicing any particular housing scheme, they're without power, they're without water, they're without proper roads and proper drainage. And that's a shame if you're claiming that all of this excess capacity is in the system, but then we're just wasting time because it is not getting to where it is most needed. And that's tragic.
Thank you.
All right, I might as well continue.
You can go.
Mr. Andrews, the accelerated acquisition of the Berbice Bridge. Why do you think that is being pursued? I know you said, well, they want to put money in the hands of the friends, family, favorite, what have you. But NIS was one of the biggest investors. With the accelerated acquisition, is NIS going to get back its money and so be in a better position to help its pensioners?
Well, I'm not sure that even if NIS gets back what is due to it from the Berbice Bridge investment, whatever remains, that it would be able to be solvent enough to honor its obligation to its contributors in terms of pension. But what I do know, and the NIS is a whole different, we can go wrong because the government owes NIS $2 billion. We can also look at that. But the accelerated acquisition of the Berbice Bridge, it can be. It really makes no sense at this point. But if you do pursue it, then it cannot be that we pay for the Berbice Bridge by anticipating that, okay, we're going to add a 10% on traffic, on bridge traffic, and then we're going to calculate that and subsidize that over the next 2 years. So we compound the 10% for 2 years. We cannot take that approach. So we could probably take an approach of a discount cash analysis approach in buying the Berbice Bridge, where we consider basically the net cash value, and you consider what is required of the board, the net cash value over 2 years, taking you to 2027. And you also have to be able to factor in the maintenance schedule that the Berbice Bridge Company is obligated to adhere to. Now, if that maintenance schedule is not honored, then we have to factor in what it would cost to honor that maintenance schedule, because it makes no sense we purchase a bridge in 2026, which is supposed to come to us free in 2027, and we're saddled with all the maintenance costs that the bridge company is contractually obligated to honor. So we have to consider all of those and come up with a buyout price. So we don't come up with a discounted buyout price in 2026. That could be a prudent approach. So if that is the approach, then yes, we can receive value for money. But the funny thing about it is that when the minister was asked the question in Parliament as we interrogated the estimates, he said to us, one thing he can assure us, he could not say to us what is the ballpark figure that he was looking at to purchase this bridge. All he can say to us is that what he can guarantee, it would be less than the subsidies. That is not a sufficient answer for the Guyanese people who have spent almost 20 years being saddled with the high cost of crossing that bridge. That to come to this point when they're supposed to get this bridge for free, at zero cost, and you're going to say to them, you're going to purchase it 1 year in advance, but it will be cheaper than if you were to subsidize the toll. That is not a sufficient answer.
Yeah, and again, I think what MP Andrew says really underscores everything we've said this morning. If so little information you're operating under, there's such a paucity of reports in the National Assembly that you really can't make sound decisions based on what they are telling you are the numbers. And it seems as though the Berbice Bridge has benefited very nicely from the largesse of the NIS scheme, which we should say was conceptualized under the PNCR government. But when you look at the infrastructure of NIS itself, as an organization, as an entity, it leaves much to be desired. Just take any trip down to the main office in Brickdam, and the kinds of investment that has been made in an entity like the Berbice Bridge really has not, as Saiku said, accrue to the shareholders of NIS, which is us, the people who paying the money to NIS every single month. Had we been so fortunate, government is still pumping money into NIS, still making a lot of grand promises to citizens of this country in terms of where NIS is going to be in any given year. And we always seem to fall short, especially in this period. And Saiko, as an economist, could tell you this, where there's a tremendously high cost of living and food inflation is through the roof. Who needs it most than those people who have contributed to NIS over the years and should be getting the return now on that dollar? We don't see a connection with that and this wholesale of the buying of the Berbice Bridge. And I dare say, to spring this in the National Assembly at the last moment, the way the government did, to avoid the kind of intense scrutiny that would have accrued to the subject matter, had, for instance, the finance minister said that in his budget presentation, and then we had 2 weeks to look at this issue. But on the very end of the scrutiny process, to have foist this on the nation is very telling, very telling.
Thank you. The floor is open as well for any other questions outside of the press statement.
All right. Now, I'm not at home, but I was able to follow the budget debate. And I noticed a disconnect in the opposition benches. There wasn't a concerted effort to pressure the government. So the government got away with a lot of things. Is there likely to be an effort for us to have a concerted opposition, or is Win going to go out there believing it can do it alone, and what comes to do?
Thank you, Adam, for that question. Now, when I was reading law, you had a concept, I hope I'm correct, called mens rea. What's in somebody's mental capacity? What is in somebody's mind? And we always say we can't know what is in somebody's mind. We can read their actions and you make assumptions. In the very same way, we can know in the mind of Win. We can take responsibility for what is in our purview of control. And I think that all of our members of parliament, all 12, represented very, very well within the time frame we have had to make our contributions to budget 2026. And I have no doubt as a political party, as a coalition, as APNU and as PNCR, we will continue to make overtures for a unified front when dealing with budget or any number of issues in the National Assembly. I have no doubt that will continue. Whether those overtures will be welcomed by Win, I think when Win has their press conference, maybe that's a good question to put to them.
Thank you. Any other questions? It's your day, Mr. Harris. It's your day. Go ahead.
I tell you. I see Anasa has posted a question in the chat. Perhaps we can take it.
Okay, let me just check on that 1 second. Okay, so we have a question from Ms. Williams, who I believe is Kaitro News. Mr. Andrews, from an economic standpoint, where do you see Gaisuku by the end of this term in office if government continues down the path of pumping money with the corporation not meeting targets?
I do not believe that Gaisuku will be turned around. I don't believe that success, the way how the government wants to sell it, will come to Gaisuku, because there's a lot of gaps in the government program, in their approach to Gaisuku. Now, the minister comes to the National Assembly and says to us that all of these billions will be allocated to Gaisuku, and he is hopeful. And I said, we cannot be hopeful after allocating billions of dollars in 2026 that a turnaround will happen by 2030. We have to be firm that our plan, that our strategic plan and our strategic direction will bear fruit by 2026. I am not confident about this, about the turnaround of GAISUCO. But if we do get it, we appreciate it. Here's the thing about it though, with GAISUCO. When you talk about GAISUCO, I personally believe, this is me, I personally believe that the government plays sugar workers as a political pawn. And so if you really care about GAISUCO, then you would strategize in a way that right sizes the industry, takes care of those persons who might not necessarily continue. Because we support sugar workers. We understand the impact that GAISUCO has on the village economy, on exchange rate, all of those things. We support them. But if you truly care about the industry, you will want to see it profitable. And so you will make the necessary strategic decisions. It doesn't mean that you make these decisions to right size GAISUCO at the expense of sugar workers. You can find ways to ensure that sugar workers have a future beyond GAISUCO. Right? And so, with GAISUCO, this loss-making entity continues, it's recurring all the time. The thing about GAISUCO also I want to point out is that for every 10,000 tons of sugar we export with GAISUCO, we literally transfer 5 billion Guyana dollars to foreign buyers. Because it is not a case of all of the sugar that is produced by GAISUCO, even though it's loss-making, it is consumed by Guyanese and Guyanese businesses. We export this loss. So we actually transfer our funds. That's the way I look at it. We transfer this fund. And that has to come to an end. Can it happen? Yes, but it needs prudent management. It needs honesty. We must approach GAISUCO with honesty, and we must not hold sugar workers as political pawns as we move in that direction. So I look at it, we transfer this, and that has to come to an end. Can it happen? Yes, but it needs prudent management, it needs honesty. We must approach GAISUCO with honesty, and we must not hold sugar workers as political pawns.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, you had another question, sorry.
Yes, I do, and I see my friend Mark Benchtop just jumped too, so we got some help. Mr. Andrews, you spoke about a lot of money being disbursed to a contracting firm. I didn't get all the figures, and whether this money was in excess of what should have been transferred. Can you help me here, sir?
We're speaking about the government buildings, Green Build. So that
it was in your opening statement.
Yes. So that contract, let me get the information so that I don't miss. Green Builders. That contract is for
the headquarters of
headquarters. Yeah, at
Public
Hague
Works.
Bosch.
Yeah,
at Hague Bosch.
Public Works new headquarters at Hague Bosch.
Yeah, that contract is for 19 point something billion dollars. The entire project is 19+ billion dollars. A contract was signed with Caribbean Green Builders for 15.8, but so far we've dispersed about 16 billion dollars. But there was so the minister was questioned on this. How is it that Caribbean Green Builders signed a contract for 15+? The building is halfway there. It's not even halfway there. Just the superstructures up so far, we've already dispersed for 2026, we're going to be dispersing almost $16 billion. There's no clarity as to how this fund is allocated. Where does the rest of the money go? You cannot just say, oh, it goes to consultants and other jobs. Where specifically does it go to? Who are the contractors? Who it is going to, so that we can question this. Again, the theme of this press statement continues to ring, that it is a lack of transparency that comes from the PPP government when it comes to spending Guyanese money, a lack of accountability.
Thank you. The floor is still open for questions as well off of the press statement. All right.
All right, yeah, there we go. Now, there is another issue that bothers me. And this issue has to do with, I mean, the party has its fan out and all of this, and you're taking the messages out there, and we're talking about high cost of living. But there seems to be a limited reaction from the people on the ground. Is the party getting that same vibe when it goes out there to interact with the people?
Adam, I don't know, limited reaction, what does that mean? But I think Guyanese people continue to feel the harshness of the high cost of living in this country on a daily basis. And that is why, for instance, you had all of the furore about Christmas cash grant, and that has not been forthcoming. And Guyanese are asking every single day, now that we have agreed that the cash grant money is in the 2026 budget, when is that forthcoming? People consistently ask that. So I don't think we aren't getting the reaction that we want. People are very concerned in the marketplace out there, how things are going up every single day in this country. And you only need to read Starbuck News any given Monday, and you'll see the concerns of citizens and how the cost of living affecting them. So I think we are right where we need to be in terms of pushing the issue, listening to the people out there. We're on the ground, as you said, consistently, region by region. We're going to continue that work. We have now moved from the scrutiny of the budget in the National Assembly to looking at its execution and scrutinizing it from that execution standpoint. We want everything that we have agreed on that is for the people to come to the people in this budget. And the faster the government does it, the better. Now, they are already giving out the contracts and so on to, of course, friends, family, and favorite. But we want what is for the people to get to them. And they need to set a date, first and foremost, when Guyanese are going to get that cash grant and all of the other things that are in the budget for the Guyanese people.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Mark Benchko.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure that maybe you guys addressed the budget, $1.5 trillion. Maybe you guys can say to the listeners as to what sort of impact that has thus far on the people on the ground as it pertains to cost of living. That we're hearing lots and lots of folks complaining about that cost of living high in terms of the unemployment rate, in terms of the 58% of people still living in poverty, so to speak, $6 US per day. I'd like to hear that question answered. The other question that I have, it pertains to the sanctioned persons, whether those sanctioned persons are still being paid by taxpayers of Guyana, mainly two of them, one the former permanent secretary, Ms. Toussaint, and the other being a senior police officer of the Guyana Police Force. Are those two persons still being paid by taxpayers of Guyana? The third question has to do with whether there has been an update on a senior police officer by the name of Caesar, who has been sanctioned with his allegation of visa revocation. And my final question for now would be the word out based on a photograph circulated on Burke's page that the parole board of the Guyana Prison Service is of all one ethnic group. And whether that is accurate, I have no reason to doubt that at this point in time, whether that is fairness towards the prisoners who are going in front of those individuals and hoping to be granted some sort of leniency and early parole. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for the questions. We don't have sufficient information on the last thing you asked, the parole board, to make a judgment on it yet, but it is receiving our active attention. We have raised the questions likewise on senior policeman Hemnod Shaw and also May Toussaint Thomas, who was a former permanent secretary, and the reluctance of the government to say whether or not they are still on the taxpayers' dollars, whether they're still receiving a salary. The reluctant to answer that question in the negative says to us that they are. The other issue concerning Mr. Caesar, that is a matter that there are questions before the National Assembly as we speak to the minister on that subject matter, asking for all of the circumstances surrounding the alleged visa revocation. That we are looking forward to getting some information from the minister on the floor of the National Assembly on, and quizzing her on some other issues, some allied issues as well, as it concerns that. And I want to leave the budget and the cost of living issue for a second. MP Andrews.
Yes, on the budget list, I said in my presentation that this budget is a budget of sand, stone, and cement. Over 50% of it goes to infrastructure. And so the president dismisses the notion that people say you can't eat road. And he has this whole argument about it. But they were at one time saying to the APNU that people cannot eat road. Now I say to the government, people cannot eat roads. People need jobs. There's no supply of up-to-date data with regards to unemployment, youth unemployment. There's no data, but the people continue to feel the squeeze. As MP Duncan said, when you hear a people are up in arms about $100,000 cash grant around Christmas time, you know that things are bad. You don't have to even have data to prove that. The proof is in the pudding, in what the people are saying. You look at the Starbucks News article on the cost of living. It's expressed there daily. So we don't see this budget. There are some measures in this budget that we agree with, but for the most part, when it comes to cost of living, there's no measure in this budget basically to alleviate poverty and to address cost of living. You give $900 million to Men on Mission. We do not know what are their targets, what is it they're gonna what they've achieved in the past 3 years to justify the expansion of that program. We have no data to suggest that we should contract that program. We don't have that. But when it comes to poverty alleviation, there's a line in the budget for just about $100 million. Now, think of the contrast. You're giving Men on Mission 9 times more than you're putting towards poverty alleviation. And that in itself speaks to the government's approach and a willingness to address poverty and to address cost of living of the Guyanese people. It is yet to be seen, but a time will come. You say sometimes, a time will come and the Guyanese people will have to make a decision as to who they think is best able to manage. We're going to continue to push these issues to the fore and continue to educate the Guyanese people. And we're hopeful that at the end of this, they will make a decision and give us the opportunity, as in the APNU, to really run the affairs in a prudent manner of this country and allow every Guyanese, especially the 50+% that is in poverty, to move from the bottom to the middle.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, our temperature that we're testing with this, again, is the people we talk to on the ground, whether it's the hinterland, it's the Mazaruni, up and lower Mazaruni, it's Region 9 that we've been to for the year already, and we plan to go back there. Whether it's Region 7, it's Region 10. We talk to people in the National Capital City in Region 4, and that is a constant thing they keep articulating. And that's one of the reasons why, for instance, the folks in Region 9 ask us about when will the government lower this electricity cost, because they want more monies in the pockets. That is why, like Saiku said, that we've articulated, people are asking about this cash grant. When is the cash grant coming? Because people need a little something to tide them over. But the fact of the matter is, we have some structural things that are wrong, and I know economist Andrews can articulate it better than I can. But from a layman's standpoint, the fact that we've been throwing monies at this issue, we spent $6 trillion in the last 5-6 years as a country, and still people are not relieved. Still, you have all of these subsidies that have to be packed in there so that people can get by. Tells you where we are. The fact that Your monthly salary alone still
suffice,
cannot
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
You need all of this other extra help from the state, which is good, but it tells you where people are in this country. And we understand that trickle down economics does not work. It is not. We have heard the president himself, Irfan Ali, cry out, to business leaders and owners to let the money go down to those at the bottom. It never does. It never does. And much of what they're trying to do will have the very same effect. It never gets down to the people that matters most. And that is why we say increase wages and salaries as one of the surest bets to alleviate poverty. And as we talk about the deficit on information and reports and so on, we don't know where we are with poverty in this country. If they want to say the 58% who live in poverty and the 35% live in abject poverty is from 2019 or whichever year, what are your figures? How are you planning? What are your numbers that you are working with that you have said $100,000 can put a dent in poverty, put a dent in the cost of living? What are the numbers you are working with? And we believe they're filling with the numbers. That is why you've had this long drawn out process to get to a report for the census. You've had a long drawn out thing with that. We're looking to see what the labor force survey says. They might have another long drawn out period. We're eager to see a lot of reports inclusive of the report concerning how 5 servicemen died in a helicopter crash in this country. But this is a government that don't like oversight. They don't like good governance. They don't like accountability. They want some one-man show. But we and the people of this country will continue to demand more from governance, more from government in this country. And that is how we test the barometer. On social media, I'm certain that people are complaining to you guys every single day. We read the comments. We read the responses on social media. When a squatter has such a viral reaction on social media, pleading to the government, pleading to the authorities to treat the people of this country with due care, to fulfill its promises. It went viral. That squatter from just beyond the Ogle airstrip there in Commons Lodge, because people can identify with what he's saying, and people are getting a hard time in this country. How can you ask a squatter to pay $1.2 million as land, $1.7 million, $700,000? There's a reason why people are squatting in this country. It's because of that high cost of living. People cannot afford rent, and that is why they endure squatting. But of course, we have offered several alternatives in our manifesto. We've said that every Guyanese earning under $400,000 should have a free piece of land, a free house land. That's like every single Guyanese. We've said rent control. Rent is exorbitant. A lot of landlords think that everybody got a Stabroek block in the backyard, right? So we say we wanna see rent control among a number of other subsidies. We said we not only want free education for our people the way we had it prior to 1992, but we also want to put a little money in the pockets of our students. They must got a little stipend. I mean, I am shocked that Gaisuka are getting all of this money on a yearly basis, all this subvention, paying its apprentices $4,000 a month. I mean, come on. So when we gauge all of these things, when we gauge this dashboard, and there's so many other issues we can put in it, we understand that the cost of living in this country is very, very exorbitant, and we have to bring relief to our people. And I think our people are going to decide it for themselves very shortly when we go to the polls again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. A final question as it pertains to the lashes that PPP, some of those PPP operatives have put on the former leader of the PNC. One such person, a good friend of y'all, I know y'all ran into him on March Day, Mark Phillips, spoke about getting white mouth and all these sorts of derogatory things about the PNC, about supporters of the PNC, and about Guyanese in general. Now, my question is not whether you have witnessed Mr. Phillips' evidence of him having white mouth. I wouldn't ask that question, neither would I be derogatory. I'm just asking specifically the question about his disrespect to PNC and PNC supporters, and by extension, Guyanese.
Any such disrespect is untenable. Any such disrespect, and we've said it. We've said it to the Prime Minister Mark Phillips, that you've hated Burnham so badly that you decide you're going to join the army and let Burnham be your commander in chief. You hated his policies and so on so bad that you were eager to join the army and spend your life in the army of this country. And for a significant portion, the executive president Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham was the commander in chief. You hated Burnham so badly, you decided that you're going to live for a very long time in Linden, of all places. A town that is synonymous with Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. You despise his policies and you despise him as a person so badly. But we understand what Mark has to say to earn his keep. We understand that. But when you look and you test, you find him wanting. The very last time we run into Prime Minister Phillips, as you alluded to, was Mashimani. Mashimani, as a national celebration, was founded, was started, was birthed under the People's National Congress reform. You hate it so badly, and here you are being part of that celebration. And so it's always with the PPP that they talk one thing, but the actions are vastly different. But we understand what it will take to bring this country back on the right track through sound economic policies. I don't think you would have a right-thinking Guyanese who would argue that the People's National Congress reform and the Partnership for National Unity has had a superior manifesto in its policies, so much so that, again, you hate Burnham and you despise Burnham and his party, but you achieve the slogan, putting people first for your national budget. I mean, this is an odd way to show it to me.
In my opinion, you see, when the PPP and specifically PM Phillips cannot match the record of Forbes Burnham, they resort to these derogatory statements about white mouth and all of these things. You cannot dismiss the accomplishments of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Transformative infrastructure projects. We're talking about education, free university education from nursery to tertiary. We're talking about linking regions. We're talking about food security. We're talking about a man who was respected in his time and in his generation by world leaders. We're talking about people who defend Caribbean leaders against international, leaders. And so you cannot question the legacy of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. You cannot question his accomplishments. And so Mark Phillips joins the bandwagon and becomes derogatory. But it's not that he has done it in private. That is what is distasteful. He didn't do it in private. He stood in the National Assembly and did this. And I think that he should be able, we should demand an apology from Mark Phillips on this, because I think it is very disrespectful and it was uncalled for.
Thank you. I'll take a final question before we close off today's press conference.
All right. Mark, me or you?
No, I'll take it since I'm the elder one.
Go ahead, Mr. Ben.
Adam, you
Go ahead,
but I
Lou.
wanted to take on the two MPs, please, gentlemen, on the recent quote-unquote suicide of a 70-year-old man at the Georgetown Public Hospital. Even while there is no word on the previous suicide by a young woman, there is no word on that investigation. Now I'd like to have your take on that. And while at that, Adam, I'm not sure if the party has issued anything yet with the recent passing of long-standing journalist, Mr. Ulrich Hexberger. Thank you.
Yeah. We'd love if our colleague Shanika Haynes can take this question as it's an issue that she has been studying and is doing some work on. Thank you.
Okay, the issue of the recent suicide is something that is extremely troubling. You know, every time we talk about the government and them taking accountability and doing the things that they should, we end up in these kind of situations because they don't. We just had the incident where a young lady who, from all investigation or talks with the family, etc., suggested that she should have been on the proper watch, would have jumped out of the window of our public hospital, and they issued a statement somehow taking some form of blame for it in one sense and saying that they will now, because it was clear they had no policies put in place to ensure that something like this does not happen again. And it is mere weeks after that incident, and we have seen this reoccurring. And the fact that at this time, the patient is said that he was under suicide watch and was capable of doing the exact same thing is something that Guyanese and as we look on cannot take lightly, because we cannot have these situations recurring where you place your loved ones in the care of an institution that should understand their needs and be there to, ensure that these things don't happen. And, you haven't heard a proper statement as yet from the hospital in this regard. We hear we're changing CEOs and this and how much money they're being paid and who's what. But we are seeing things that we should not see. We saw the incident where a patient was killed at another institution. And this is unacceptable in every stand, in every form, for a nation who is expending so much in their allocation of budgets and talking about development of a country, and we cannot even take care of our vulnerable persons at the hospitals, people who are left in our care. And we have to take a stand on this, and we have to be calling for the resignation of persons who are responsible, and for there to be a thorough investigation of those responsible, that consequences should follow. Because these things continue to reoccur because there are no consequence to actions in these matters. And at this stage, we call strongly on the government to, one, ensure that a thorough investigation happen on this recent matter and the other two matters that I just listed, and that those responsible should be brought in and consequences should be met for what has not been done, because it is a responsibility of those institutions to take proper care of the persons put in their care. And I believe that we have to see something happen. I mean, it's simple. You have a budget that is so large. You have this incident. We haven't talked about installing maybe a grill or something at these windows to ensure someone who's on suicide watch. So I do believe we have to take a strong stand on this, and the persons responsible for allowing this to happen for a second time at Georgetown Hospital should be held accountable in this matter.
Please don't run away yet. They got one other thing,
Go ahead.
one other issue that I think you should address. Now, I read about a 14-year-old mother dying after giving birth at the hospital. With all the social services, why was there no charge of rape when this girl was found to be pregnant? What did the hospital do? They thought, I see some postmortem said she died of anemia and all of this. Wasn't she monitored?
So, if I may, on this question as well, again, we're talking about institutions that should be looking in. Now, she delivered at the age of 14, and I do not understand how is it that a young lady under the age of 16 would have given birth to a child. You do not hear where the welfare would have stepped in, whether they found the person who would have impregnated her or not. She should have been referred to a welfare officer who should have been making checks at that home to really see what's happening and to keep check on that young lady. That in the case of her dying from what the postmortem is saying is something that could have been caused simply because proper care has not been given to her in the home. And again, we come back to issues. We don't know whether the family was able to provide the correct nutrients for her because cost of living is really tearing families up. So there are many issues that could have caused or led to her death in this case. But those institutions that are set in should have been following up in this matter to ensure that this young lady's life could not have been lost the way it has been. And again, this is the government taking responsibility for the institutions and the responsibilities that they should when it comes to these situations. There is no way that the welfare system should have not been making regular checks on this young lady due to the circumstance in which she went to the hospital and she delivered a child at the age of 14. So again, we have to call on persons being held responsible. I want to hear a statement from the welfare department, whether they were involved or not. And, how was the hospital able to release her into the care of the family that brought her in this state? So again, our institutions.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. With there being no other questions, I want to thank our media personnel again for joining today's press conference, and of course to our viewing audience on all our social media platforms. We're coming down to the end of February. I do hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you healthy and well in the new month of March.